Let's work on practice exam number 2, problem number 3. In problem number 3, we have Island Novelties Incorporated of Palau makes 2 products, Hawaiian Fantasy and Tahitian Joy. Each product's selling price, variable expense per unit, and actual sales volume are as follows. So Hawaiian Fantasy has a selling price of 12, variable expenses of 9, and number of units sold annually, $36,000. Tahitian Joy, 120, 48, and 5,400 in quantity. Fixed expenses are $437,000 a year. So in requirement 1, we're supposed to prepare a contribution format income statement showing both dollar and percent columns for each product and for the company as a whole, and then compute the company's break-even point in dollar sales. So for each product, we're going to calculate first the sales, subtract the variable expenses, and then come down to the contribution margin. Then we're going to subtract the fixed expenses and come down to the net operating income. I already had filled in all of these headers. So first, we begin with our sales. As I said, after our sales, we move down to our variable expenses. Sales minus variable expenses is contribution margin. We subtract the fixed expenses from the entire company, and we calculate our net operating income. So let's first start with Hawaiian Fantasy. So for Hawaiian Fantasy, our revenue is going to be calculated as $36,000 multiplied by 12. And our variable expenses are going to be calculated as $36,000 times 9. So 36,000 times 12 gives us 432,000, and 36,000 times 9 gives us 324,000. Now to calculate the percentages, our revenue is going to be 12 divided by 12. Our variable expenses are, to calculate it, we can either take the 9 divided by the 12 or the 324,000 divided by 432,000. So again, for the percentages, for the revenue, everything shown as a percentage of revenue. We would take 432,000, of course, divided by 432,000, and of course we would get 100% if we did that. Now for the variable expenses, we can take 324,000 divided by 432,000, or if you want, much easier, we can just take 9 divided by 12. You'll see that both come out to the same answer. So if I take 324,000 divided by 432,000, I'm going to get 0.75. And if I take 9 divided by 12, I'm going to get the same 0.75. Now we're going to do that for Tahitian Joy. So for Tahitian Joy, our revenue is going to be calculated as 5,400 multiplied by 120, and our variable expenses are going to be 5,400 multiplied by 48. So if I take 5,400, multiply it by 120, I'm going to get revenue of 648,000. If I take 5,400 and multiply it by 48, I get my variable expenses of 259,200. Now to calculate the percentage, once again, I can either take 259,200, divide by 648,000, or it would work out the same mathematically if I took 48 and divided by 120. So 259,200 divided by 648,000 gives us 0.4, and 48 divided by 120 would give us the same 0.4. So putting these numbers into Connect, for Hawaiian Fantasy, my sales are 432,000. That is 100%. For Tahitian Joy, my sales are 648,000. Those are 100%. And I just add the two. So 432,000 plus 648,000 is going to give us 1,080,000 total revenue. And that, of course, is 100%. Now I'm going to put in my variable expenses. So for Hawaiian Fantasy, my variable expenses were 324,000. Notice how the computer calculates the contribution margin automatically. And my variable expenses were 0.75. So 75% of the sales. I calculated that number right there. The 324 divided by the 432, or 9 divided by 12. For Tahitian Joy, my variable expenses were 259,200. And I calculated that my variable expenses were 40% of sales. So 40 is going to go right in here. And now I want to calculate my total variable expenses. So my total variable expenses are the 324,000 plus the 259,200. So I'm going to add those together. My total variable expenses are 583,200. And now this becomes a very, very important number. Our overall variable expense percentage we take the total company variable expenses of 583,200 and we divide by the total company revenue of 1,080,000. So if I take 583,200 and divide by 1,080,000, that's just because it's set. If I put it in percentage style, you can see here, and increasing the decimal, it's exactly 54%. So this number right over here, the 46% contribution margin for the total company, which is 100% minus the 54% total expense percentage for the entire company, this 46% contribution margin number for the entire company becomes very important. So now we just put our fixed expenses in for the total company, 437,000, and we see that we have net operating income of $59,800. Now let's move on to requirement 1B. So in requirement 1B, we're supposed to compute the company's break-even point in dollar sales. So going back to the next formula, if you want to calculate a break-even point in dollar sales, what you do is you take the fixed cost and you're going to divide by the contribution margin percentage, which is the contribution margin divided by the sales. So as I said, right now for this company, our contribution margin percentage is 46%, 0.46, and our fixed expenses are $437,000. So to calculate the break-even point for this company in dollar sales, all we're going to do is take the fixed costs So we're going to take our fixed costs of $437,000, and then we're going to divide that by our total company contribution margin which was 46%, or 0.46. So if I take 437,000 and I divide it by 0.46, we're going to come down to $950,000 break-even point in dollar sales. Now, the margin of safety in dollars is the current sales minus break-even sales. So we saw when we did this in the first part, our total company sales were $1,080,000. Our break-even sales are $950,000. So our margin of safety is going to be the $1,080,000 of total company sales that we calculated in part 1 minus the $950,000 break-even sales that we just calculated. So if I take $1,080,000, subtract $950,000, I'm going to get $130,000 margin of safety in dollars. And the margin of safety percentage is just the margin of safety divided by the break-even point in sales dollars. I think I spoke incorrectly. I believe that the margin of safety is going to be calculated. The margin of safety percentage, is the margin of safety divided by current sales. So in this case, to calculate the margin of safety percentage, we would take $130,000 as our current margin of safety, and our current sales are $1,080,000. So in that case, taking $130,000 divided by $1,080,000, we're going to get a margin of safety, and again, that just came up because I'm set to 0 decimals, of exactly, 12.04%. So rounded to the nearest dollar, 12.0%. And we are correct. Now, moving on to the next part of the problem. The company has developed a new product called Samoan Delight that sells for $45 each and has variable expenses of $27 per unit. If the company can sell 12,000 units of Samoan Delight without incurring any additional fixed expenses, A, we're supposed to prepare a revised contribution format income statement that includes Samoan Delight, assume that sales of the other two products do not change, and then compute the company's revised break-even point in dollar sales. So I'm just going to scroll back up on the right to my numbers for Hawaiian Fantasy and Tahitian Joy. Those are not going to change. So I'll just put those in requirement 2A. So once again, we're going to start off with our sales. Subtract our variable costs to come down to our contribution margin. From our contribution margin, we subtract the total company fixed costs to come down to our operating income or loss. I hope it's going to be an income. We'll see. We might have to change it to a loss at the end. So we already calculated sales of Hawaiian Fantasy at $432,000, and we already calculated that percentage was 100%. Oop, I'm on the wrong side. We already calculated our sales of Tahitian Joy as $648,000, and that also was 100% of their sales. And we'll put in the numbers for the variable expenses before we calculate Samoa Delight. So Hawaiian Fantasy, their variable expenses were $324,000, and their expense percentage was 75%. It was right over here, 75%. For Tahitian Joy, we already calculated that their variable expenses, $259,200. $259,200 divided by 648,000 gives us 40%. Now we're just going to add our Samoan Delight. So, for our Samoan Delight, the revenue is going to be 12,000 units times 45. The variable expenses are going to be 12,000 times 27. So 12,000 times 45. And 12,000 multiplied by 27 gives us 324,000. And then the last thing that we're going to need is the variable expense percentage. So our variable expense percentage is just 324,000 divided by 540,000, or again we could take 27 and divide it by 45. So doing the calculation and preemptively putting it in percentage format, I take 324,000 divided by 540,000, and I get exactly 60%. So in here I'm going to put in the 540,000, in here I'm going to put in the 324,000, and 100%, and 60%. Now we have to add up the total revenue. So to add up the total revenue, I'm going to take 432,000, add 648,000, and add 540,000. $1,620,000 of total revenue. Now I'm going to add up the total variable expenses. So I'm going to take 324,000. I'm going to add 259,200, and I'm going to add another 324,000. So we're going to get 907,200 as the total variable expenses. Now, from the total, once again our percentage is 100, and we'll calculate that variable cost percentage, but now we're going to subtract the total company fixed costs, given as 437,000 a year, and we have operating income of 275,800. Now the last number we need to fill in is this percentage right here, and that's very, very important. So the total company variable percentage, you just take the total variable cost of 907,200 and divide by the total revenue of 1,620,000. So doing that calculation, once again, that's just set to non-percentage style. So we've got exactly 56%. Now that we know that that part is correct, we can go down to the last part, and it just asks us to compute the revised break-even point in dollar sales, and compute the revised margin of safety in dollars and margin of safety percentage. So, going through to calculate our total company break-even, we're just going to take the fixed cost and we're going to divide it by the total contribution margin percentage. So in this case, and this is going to be in dollars, we're just going to take the fixed cost for the total company of $437,000, and we divide it by our company contribution margin percentage, which is this number right here, 44%. So we divide by 0.44. So if I take 437,000 and divide by 0.44, I'm going to get $993,181.82 in break-even sales. So we're supposed to round our answers to the final whole dollar. That is going to be 993,182. Now that we know our break-even point, from requirement 2A, we know our current sales is $1,620,000. So our margin of safety in dollars is the current sales minus the break-even sales. So once again, we're going to take our $1,620,000 current sales and then subtract the break-even sales of $993,182. So it looks like our margin of safety is $626,818 in dollars. So now if you remember to calculate the margin of safety percentage, we're going to calculate the margin of safety divided by the current sales. So we just calculated our margin of safety is $626,818, and our current sales are $1,620,000. And that comes out as 0 only because I have it set for the commas. So I'm just going to change it to percent style. And it looks like it's 38.69%. And it says round your margin of safety answer to 1 decimal place. So that would be 38.7%. And there we go. We have now finished problem number 3.